We'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining. As you are very much aware, this is the Nurse Policy Entrepreneur Cafe, or NPEC. That's how I've been saying the acronym. I think it makes most sense in my brain, but Nurse Policy Entrepreneur Cafe and Community is kind of the language we're using. But really excited for today's session. We're aiming to run really between 12 and 1. A lot of our cafes can tend to go on longer, so if folks want to stay on and chat, definitely feel free to do that. But we'll kind of start trickling out around 1 p.m. probably. But just a couple kind of housekeeping stuff before we get started with today's presentation. But I'll just give a brief overview of the NPEC for those who need a refresher. Really, the NPEC seeks to be the go-to compendium and location for all nurses interested in becoming effective policy entrepreneurs, and by learning through one another through professional dialogue and group mentorship. As everyone, really is aware on this call, nurses are well positioned to incorporate health in all policies. We are the first witnesses to all determinants of health and really have a keen understanding that the health system strengthening expands beyond traditional direct care roles, and that our nursing expertise in multiple spheres of influence shapes health and social policy that addresses problems in healthcare, including in our workplaces and government, our professional organizations and associations, like we'll hear today, and civil society. And we also know that policy doesn't always mean politics. It's a common misconception a lot of the times, and that driving effective change doesn't always mean running for office to do so. Really, as nurses, as the largest constituent profession, we've maintained our status as the most trusted profession for a very long time. I think the latest Gallup was like the past 24 years-ish. But we're really rarely engaged in the process of healthcare policymaking and reform, using our trusted voice to drive change. So the concept of nurse policy entrepreneurs, while they have been in practice for some time, is often overlooked. And this gap is not only from a lack of invitation, but also from nurses' struggle to identify as thought leaders in this area and that professional identity piece, which we're going to get into today as well. And just a brief overview of the Nurse Policy Entrepreneur Cafe Foundation. So we have two kind of theories that we are modeling on when building the cafe, founded by our lovely Michael Polachek, who's in the audience today. But really, these two foundation pieces are Parse's Human Becoming Community Model and the World Cafe Method. The Human Becoming Community Model describes how the concepts of co-creation lead to community building and evolution. I really encourage you to take a look at this community model in more depth. It's really interesting. And again, the meaningful evolution of identity is rooted in that model as well. And the World Cafe Method too. That's really where we get the idea of establishing a psychologically safe environment for collaborative innovation and shared learning in this setting that we hold our cafes every month. The three change concepts that are really complementary to these discussions and shared learning are moving, initiating, anchoring, shifting, and pondering, shaping, and really just roots us more into how we shift between creating new ideas and meanings as a result of our conversations with others, recognizing when ideas kind of continue to improve our own thoughts that we have, or anchor them in new thoughts and make them stronger. And also that dialogue and meaningful listening to complete the thoughts of others as well. And this is the basis of the cafe that we host again every month. We have no affiliations, no paid memberships, no eligibility criteria, no borders. Really, we want to make sure that nurses need an organized place to organized process to meet, network, and discuss how we approach issues, not necessarily debating our different stances on them. We know that everyone has their own areas of expertise, those hot button issues that we put our passion or energy towards. But really, in holding this space, we're creating that structural empowerment for nurses to become effective policymakers and implementers, while simultaneously exploring how to create the system for true deep democracy at all levels to improve our communities. This is something that I've experienced for sure, is it helps break down imposter syndrome. That no one see one do an approach when we're talking to nurses who are doing the thing and seeing yourself in their experiences as well, and really helping to facilitate that evolution and guiding nurses through group mentorship and resources, inviting them into the advocacy and active participation in policy engagement, and really embodying what we believe and advocating in new ways. An important aspect of this is that we're open to nurses in all settings, nursing students, and at all levels across the globe as well. And just a quick shout out for our NPE essential elements. So we really believe in the idea of that professional development plan, personal and professional. And so we've developed these several areas of really just making sure that we can kind of pick apart what makes a nurse policy entrepreneur and where some of these areas you feel you've had those strong skill sets and other areas that might need some improvement. So taking a look at these, creating that professional development plan, and clarifying your why, your reason, your purpose of why you're in nursing in the first place, and how that links into your interest in policy engagement and advocacy, and continuing to develop your expertise in different areas that you find interest. So please feel free to take a look at these. We also have on our website different links and resources for each of these essentials as well, if you're interested in taking a deep dive into those skill sets. And just another quick housekeeping with community netiquette. So because we believe in open access to these resources, we do record these sessions so that our community members across the globe who can't join synchronously each month can access the information after the monthly session. When we have our speakers, then we do get their consent to share this and have first right to the edits. And in order to maintain our psychologically safe space, we do not share any of the discussion that follows or anything in the chat as well. We really, one of my favorite parts about our monthly cafes are those really robust Q&As afterwards and our really comprehensive discussion, and that adds to each month's session. But we do carefully, again, edit this and make sure that we don't include anyone's faces, names, voices, or anything without your express permission. And feel free to post in the chat or just keep your camera off or your mic muted if you're not comfortable with sharing that on YouTube afterwards. And I will go ahead and just introduce our speakers for today. The title for today's presentation is Beyond the Bedside, Cultivating Community and Advocacy in the Young Professional Special Interest Group. And I want to confirm, just as we go into the conversation, Giselle, is it YPSIG? Is that how we're referring to the acronym?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Sometimes in my mind, I'm like YPSIG, but no,
YPSIG,
I don't
yeah.
think anybody said.
Okay. And that's not probably how you read it. I don't know. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
just double checking. Okay.
yeah.
But I'll just highlight, the some of the things that you guys will talk about today. But that our description of the presentation is that belonging is a precursor to advocacy. In this session today, our speakers will discuss their journeys in creating a dedicated haven for newer nurses within their state professional organizations, highlighting the YPSIG experience and focusing on how informal spaces foster deep connections across diverse backgrounds and generations. From the development of their grassroots mentorship program to empowering nurses to find their policy voice, they'll discuss why cultivating a sense of home within the profession is key to sustainable nursing leadership. So first up, we have Dr. Giselle Gerardi. Dr. Gerardi is a clinical assistant professor at Stony Brook University School of Nursing. With a clinical focus on perinatal health, her research advances health promotion, disease prevention, and perinatal health equity among Latin populations in the United States. Her work also emphasizes health policy education and nurse engagement in policy processes to address structural determinants of health. Dr. Gerardi received the 2025 Nassau-Suffolk Excellence in Nursing Award for Education and was a Stony Brook Presidential Award finalist for Nurturing a Welcoming, Inclusive Campus Culture. She serves as Vice President of American Nurses Association New York and as a New York State Membership Assembly Representative, contributing to statewide nursing policy and advocacy initiatives. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Gerardi. We have three speakers today.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course, yeah, of course. And more in the future, hopefully. But we also have two nurses with us, Lo-Ruchama Hilaire. I hope I'm saying that correctly. You are a clinical nurse too, and I'm going to butcher this. Clinical nurse too on hepatopancreatobiliary step-down oncology. Did I get it? Okay. Oncology unit at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where she provides care to complex post-operative and critically ill patients. She serves on the Night Shift Council and curates monthly wellness initiatives aimed at supporting staff well-being and resilience. In addition to her clinical role, Lo-Ruchama is the manager of clinical simulation and lab at Long Island University, Brooklyn, where she supports nursing education through the coordination and delivery of over 200 high-fidelity simulation experiences annually, collaborating closely with faculty to enhance student learning. Lo-Ruchama earned her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Long Island University, Brooklyn, where she served as Student Nurses Association (SNA) president from 2022 to 2023, advocating for student leadership, engagement, and professional development. She currently serves as the secretary of the Greater New York City Black Nurses Association and curates Discovery Day for nursing students with the NYC chapter of the Oncology Nursing Society, helping to create meaningful pathways for professional growth and workforce equity. Thank you for joining us today, Lo-Ruchama.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And last but not least, we have Delaney Sanders. Delaney is an ICU nurse in Buffalo, New York at the Veterans Administration. She is pursuing her SANE, SANE certification and is currently volunteering with the Erie County Medical Reserve Corps. Within ANA New York, she is currently serving as Bylaws Committee Chair. She earned her bachelor's and master's degree in nursing from Alverno College, where she served as the founding president of her Student Nursing Association in 2022 to 2024. Additionally, she served on the Student Nursing Association of Arizona 2022 to 2023 and was on the National Student Nursing Association as Ethics and Governance Chair. Prior to nursing, Delaney was an exercise physiologist and emergency medical personnel pursuing research and education. She hopes to tie in this knowledge as her career progresses to ensure care for all current and future patients. And again, thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing your experiences with our community. I will hand it over to you to take it away for our presentation. And just to say as well, if anyone, just to reserve some social battery, wants to turn your camera off or your mics off for the presentation, feel free to do so as well. Take it away. Oh, you're muted, Giselle.
There we go. Before we start, I just wanted to give a short story of how this all started. About 3 years ago, this nurse came to ANA Hill Day. I happened to be there. It was her first time, and she was interested in the membership assembly. So she came as an observer. She's from New York, so she hung out at our table, and I just got to really know her. And we just talked about how we needed to grow the involvement of younger nurses in these type of organizations. I think a lot of people see the potential in her. And a year later from that time that we met, I convinced her, well, I wasn't the only one, but I had convinced her to run for the board of ANA, and she won. So her name is Josephine Ajay, and I think most of you know her. She is an incredible person, but one of the things she ran on was trying to get the next generation of nurse leaders more involved. So this is kind of like what came out of it and what we're looking to continue to grow. So I'll let Lo-Ruchama take it away.
Yeah, and kind of just piggybacking off of what Giselle said, Josephine, she noticed that there is this gap and needing to find something to help, bridge this gap. And so with that being said, I think the first thing to really talk about is, who do we see within nursing organizations when we take take a step back and we look? Who do we actually see? We ask ourselves the question, is it generationally diverse? Do we see early career nurses, or is it mostly experienced nurses, retired nurses in these nursing organizations or, different places of involvement? And so I think the bigger question is, what voices are missing, right? And so one thing that's been consistently identified and something that I've personally experienced is the fact that younger nurses are often missing from these spaces. And I think what's interesting is it's not the fact that we don't care. I think that younger nurses, especially, we want to lead, we want to grow, and we want to get more involved. But at the same time, I think that there's a decreased access to getting there in terms of the pathway. And so to be able to bridge this gap so that it doesn't affect as many individuals, because it can really impact the entire profession of nursing. And so that's where, I want to get into the next slide about talking about, the nursing workforce crisis. It's not only the fact that, there's an engagement issue, but in New York State alone, 16% of nurses under 30, 30% are over, 34% are over 50. And so we're seeing that, the workforce is aging, and without, having younger nurses, step in, it can be detrimental to, the workforce. And so why is this happening? We know that there are workplace challenges, burnout, stress, and sometimes not feeling like, we have a voice or a place in the profession. And so I think many of us can relate to this feeling, coming in motivated, but not always feeling supported or connected. And it's not that there's a staffing issue, but, really a pipeline issue, and that we need to be able to help nurses be in places where they feel more comfortable, and we're able to help them not only be involved, in the hospital or at the bedside, but also outside in organizations that way to help advance the profession in itself. And if we lose nurses early, we'll unfortunately lose, future leaders, educators, advocates. And so I think, especially when you have newer nurses that are younger, it's great to grab them in while they're fresh and new.
Perfect. So then this is kind of where the young professional SIG comes in to play. I am a second career nurse. I had a career prior to this, but at the same time, we want to make a measurable impact. As of this moment, we actually had our meeting yesterday, and we had both the president and Giselle. So we have the president and the vice president of ANA New York, like coming to the young professional special interest group, and making not only the board more accessible, but making the advocacy and the policy and professional organizations more accessible for young individuals. Because when you hear a young professional interest group, you're like, oh, okay, I could go to that. I'm not dedicating my time to this. It's like every other month, it's bi-monthly. So I don't have to put a lot of time into it, when a lot of the times when you're first starting nursing, you're drowning a lot. Like you're just trying to learn, you're trying to apply your nursing skills that you learned in nursing school to your first job. So having low stakes, low cost, attending the bi-monthly meetings, but then having access to someone at that higher level, like Giselle or like Connie Perkins, the ANA New York president, having direct access to their face and like access to their knowledge. But then being invited to conferences that you may not know of otherwise. I work for the federal government, so I don't get presented with these opportunities. It's not something that they usually, say, hey, why don't you go to this annual conference? So being presented with this from a special interest group, from your peers, and not from leadership within your hospital or from maybe your professors. It's your peers saying, hey, come to this conference. There's going to be other, 20 to 30 to 40-year-olds, people that are within your same age range, within your same diverse group, that you can connect with. And sometimes, one thing that I've heard a lot recently is that if you're not at the table, build a bigger one. And I think this group is helping build a bigger table for these younger nurses that may not feel that they have a spot at that table. So within this group collaboration, I know that this presentation was given at the ANA Impact and Opportunity Summit. They were able to submit for that. And the Opportunity Summit, having younger voices there, it helps unite nurse leaders, remove barriers, amplify key voices, advance fairness of representation. And the Young Professional SIG was able to be present in Washington, D.C. with some of these more generational nurses, and with some of these more established professional groups. And then that leads us to the mentorship program, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So it's really cool that we brought up the mentorship program earlier in the meeting. But this is the brainchild of one of our members. Her name is Emily, and she has been the driving force, because although their ANA has their own mentorship program, and it's really cool to connect with people across the nation. At the same time, sometimes you want someone locally who maybe knows exactly what it feels like to be a nurse in New York City, in Long Island, in Brooklyn. I'm in Buffalo, so I don't know any of those things. But a state level mentorship program allows ANA New York specifically to address New York specific practice and policy challenges, transform membership from a transactional experience into a professional community, and create those meaningful human connections that strengthen the human experience that nursing needs to be. Like Lo-Ruchama said, nurses are leaving the field faster than they're entering it. And that's one of the biggest issues that nurses are facing. We're having an aging nursing population, and we want to keep people at the bedside, but then also promote learning and knowledge, and getting them the tools that they need to succeed in whatever facet of nursing they want to be in. So this is, I know there right now we're actually starting the pilot program. So the QR code right there is for the mentorship form. But I think it's such a cool thing to be part of a connected, supported, and empowered community. But sometimes it's just that single person that that sparks that change in you, that sparks the connection and the drive for policy change. Yeah.
I just want to add, you do need to be an ANA New York member to be a mentor or mentee in this program, but we figured we'd throw it out there anyway. So we wanted to share stories. Delaney and Lo-Ruchama are going to share their stories, but I see Moselle's actually on. But we have a video from her about her involvement in the SIG and why she's doing it and what it's providing for her.
Hi, my name is Moselle Jules. I'm currently an ANA Next Gen ambassador, and I joined the Young Professional SIG because I wanted to be a part of a space that's centered on early career nurses. I also wanted to be a part of a community and see a different perspective of how other early career nurses are navigating leadership and advocacy and growth at this state of their career. And I see this as an opportunity for us to turn our ideas into action and for us to support each other as new emerging leaders while shaping the future of nursing together. Thank you.
And we also have Emily. Again, she's the one who's really behind the mentorship program.
I joined the Young Professionals SIG group of ANA New York because I wanted to feel more connected to the nursing profession beyond my day-to-day role, as well as continue my leadership journey through ANA New York. As an early career nurse, I was looking for a space where I could learn from others who are navigating similar challenges, share experiences, and grow together. I hope to build meaningful relationships, gain more mentorship, and develop confidence in my professional voice, while also learning how to become more involved in leadership and advocacy within nursing as a registered nurse. I ended up making more connections, as well as reconnecting with colleagues and friends from previous organizations I was a part of as a student. This SIG group also opened up more opportunities for me to be involved, such as creating a mentorship group for our state chapter. I am grateful for this group, and I'm grateful for the connections and opportunities that have been provided.
And I don't know, Lo-Ruchama, Delaney, if you have anything that you want to add, your own stories.
Yeah, I can go first. So I know I mentioned it's just kind of that one person that makes a difference. There was when I was in nursing school, I was in a direct entry master's program, and we were all bachelor's students that were entering nursing, and we were the first cohort to go through. So all the professors were new, everything was new, simulation was new. We were a brand new building, and that's why I was the inaugural president. The single professor who was like, we should probably start a nursing organization. And she's like, Delaney, you seem like you'd be a good person to do it. And I took that as a challenge. So that one person then, connected us with the State Nursing Association of Arizona, who connected me to the National Student Nursing Association. And then I ran for the board, and then I connected with so many people across the nation. And that got me, to here to New York, because I knew I had people that I loved and support, that I felt supported by in New York. And so I wouldn't have moved here from Arizona if I didn't know that I had support here in New York. So It was one of the things that brought me here. But yeah, it takes a single person making a single comment sometimes, and then the whole trajectory of your life can move you from Arizona to New York. So it's something melting.
I think that's
Thank you.
great, Delaney. And kind of piggying back off of what you said, with having one person, I think for me, where it all started was when I was in nursing school and I had gone to the NSNA conference, which is the National Student Nurses Association conference. And then when I was there, kind of, just, being at the, I forget the name of it, but they have all the different nursing organizations and all the different tablings, and then going to the Oncology Nursing Society table. And that's what I was interested in at the time, oncology, and meeting Patrick Flynn. And he talked to me about what the organization was. And he said, you should reach out to whoever the president is and join. So that's exactly what I did. And that's how I slowly started getting involved in nursing organizations. And I think for me, a big thing, especially when we look at being able to retain nurses in the profession itself, clearly, there's a drastic deficit, and 1 in 4 of Gen Z nurses are leaving the profession. And so for me, it's yes, retaining nurses, but also how do we keep them engaged? And so for me, that was one of the biggest things, especially working inpatient. I work in oncology and critical care, so it can be very depressing at times. So for me, one of the biggest parts of encouragement for me was being involved outside. And so I wanted to join the YPSIG because it was honestly the first space that I ever have seen in a nursing organization that is tailored specifically to new nurses entering their career. There are quite a few things for nursing students, but what about new nurses who are entering the field? And so the fact that ANA YPSIG has been able to create those bi-monthly events with their meetings. For example, yesterday there was the resume workshop. And then before, we have had other speakers. And I know that ANA YPSIG is going to continue to have more speakers to help these new nurses develop in their careers. For me, that was fascinating because I do feel like many other organizations should do the same. And it's a great way to retain nurses. So that's a little bit about my story.
Thank you so much. So, it kind of leads to the mentorship aspect, which is my role. I can't take any of the credit. This was really built by a lot of the current members of the YPSIG. The co-chairs, Josephine and Lauren, are great leaders, and just helping to give them that little support to navigate the committees that needed to approve this, and provide the encouragement and talk about the norms and the process and getting everybody engaged. I think it's a mentor is like a nurse, or a nurse is like a mentor, in the fact that you're helping people reach their potential, and help get those goals that they're trying to attain. This is just something that lives in my head, but the whole idea of just getting new nurses engaged with ANA is really important for me. When I was a new nurse, I was really interested in learning who spoke for me. So I was a member of ANA New York, and yeah, I wasn't that involved. I was a little lost. I didn't know how to get involved. Uh, and that happened over time. But we wanted a space where people can engage with their state ANA, connect with members across the state, and gain professional skills. Like Lo-Ruchama mentioned, there was a resume workshop yesterday. We hope to do something on public speaking soon, and also mentorship. So that's the entry level of this. But then we hope to nurture this group of nurses and future groups of nurses into sharing ideas and leading projects. I think every organization, nursing or not, has trouble engaging and getting new members. It's really difficult. So trying to learning from them and having their ideas shared and leading those projects, again, like the mentorship project, it's really important, and I think it'll help our organization grow. And then involvement in governance structures. So, like Delaney had mentioned, myself and the president of ANA New York, Connie Perkins, were pretty involved with this organization. And I think that's unique in the sense that not, we're board members, obviously, but like board members don't usually attend things like this. They're not, they seem so distant. And I think by us getting so involved, like, I'd like to think that we're cultivating a spirit that people can come to us and share those ideas. And maybe they don't know the process of doing it, but they know the people who can help. Um, and then this can inspire our nurses to begin participating in unit or facility committees as well. And then ultimately, we're looking for full policy engagement on a facility, regional, or national level. Changing policies at work, going to lobby day or hill day. They're great opportunities to learn how to use your voice and when to use it. Um, and hopefully we can get everybody participating in all of those events. Um, like I said, advocacy days. Um, we hope to get people there. In addition to going up to Albany, we also have a voter box where people can comment and leave, messages for their representatives. So if it's not accessible because it's too far or with work, there's still an opportunity to participate in these advocacy days. Uh, Getting involved in the board of directors, we want our board to be as diverse as our membership. So it's really important to get those perspectives. And engaging with leadership at a facility level. Getting to know the leaders at their work facilities so that they can also feel empowered to suggest and change and do all the things that they want to do that's going to help nursing and patient outcome, and maybe one day participate in legislature themselves. And that's our presentation. We have our LinkedIn contacts in there, and we're open for questions or comments.
Thank you guys so much. That was such an informative and inspiring presentation. I was taking notes the whole time and just drinking it in. I'm gonna go ahead and rewatch that recording as well to see anything I missed. But some of the key takeaways that I really learned in that presentation, and I noticed that really it's a larger example of what we do in our roles as nurses, kind of on an everyday basis of identifying those barriers and gaps in access. I mean, at the bedside, we're identifying gaps in care or in access to, things that are affecting our patients outside of the hospital walls, like those social determinants of health. But in this case, it was access to that community and those engagement pathways, which I think was really interesting, and really applying that same model of ideating together and creating those innovative solutions instead of just on the individual patient level, but on this greater professional level as well, I think is a really great application of our nursing skill set to really create that space for our own individuals and nurses within our profession. And I know this is something that you guys kind of also kind of spoke to, but the fact that it really starts with one person identifying that issue and then building a coalition around it. And that kind of ties into that NP essential elements under relationships in our coalition building as well. You can kind of again look at those elements and see where you're already making progress, where you're already growing. Also, the idea of that baked in support from the start to create that solid foundation and build a career and professional identity on. I can identify with everything you guys were saying. When I started my nursing career 10 years ago, I had a new resident nurse like program, but the fact that it wasn't as baked in outside of work, and I also growing that professional identity, I think it would have been very helpful as well. And just getting exposed to new ideas for what we are capable of doing and what policy even means, not necessarily I think I spoke to Lo-Ruchama and others as well. Kind of my example when I think of my policy awakening was that I always thought of policy when I was at the bedside as, oh, the policy on how to do dressing change, how to, collect blood from a PICC line or something. But policy looks completely different once you take it outside the walls of the hospital and apply it to everything else that impacts individuals' health, that eventually lead them to getting admitted to the hospital. So it's all relevant. And I will say as well, the idea of making mentorship meaningful and accessible rather than transactional and hierarchical. You guys spoke about that warm invitation and how that makes a huge difference in feeling welcome to these professional organizations and spaces, whether that be something like the YPSIG or even just younger nurses or new nurses being present at these professional conferences, showing up and using your voices to inspire other nurses as well. But that makes a difference when that invitation is coming from your peers, making that feel more accessible. Lastly, wanted to highlight, and this is something that Giselle, when you sent us over the description of the presentation today, the idea that belonging is the precursor to advocacy. I think that's such a powerful statement, and I never really heard it put that way, but that's really that is what it is what really brings you kind of into that professional identity as an advocate, and seeing yourself in that way in the first place, that mind shift, change or shift. Piquing that interest, and then Lo-Ruchama, as you were saying, sustaining meaningful engagement is key as well. You can pique that interest, but if someone doesn't have the place to go or other people to talk to about that interest, then it's not going to, motivate actual action and change down the line. And I really appreciated that policy involvement slide with those different levels, 1, 2, and 3. I feel like that's a very visual representation of how you first get involved with policy and advocacy and then kind of level up over time once you have access to these resources, these people who are doing the thing. And then really that ultimate goal is that full policy engagement as, full partners in healthcare reform at that facility, regional, national, and international level. Learning how and when to use your voice. And I'll just say, and then I'll maybe ask some questions or leave some room open for questions as well. But when I was thinking about that, Giselle, when you were talking, my advocacy journey and policy journey kind of started at level 3 of getting involved and interested at that international scale of advocacy. And I'm finding that I'm moving back towards that local regional level because I don't have the tools yet in order to do that at this smaller level. So I'm like, I want to get in touch with you guys to see how I can make some differences in New York, and make a tangible difference in my local community instead of just advocating on these larger scales. They're all needed, but I think, some people I'm interested in finding that balance as well. So I will turn it over to the crowd here if you guys have any questions, and let's discuss.
I see Michael has his hand up.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for that conversation. I think of policy as just a set of rules to do a thing. And politics is really, the way I look at politics, it's the method for determining the distribution of limited resources. How do you go about deciding what resources go towards what thing? Because when you have, whether it's a hospital or a country, you have a limited amount of resources. There's always going to be a conflict between what people think things, money or resources should go to. So the politics part is that process of determining where those limited resources, sort of an ecological thing. What do you do with all these? You only have 10 things, but you need 15. How do you distribute those? So, and I think that's part of the problem with the association. Some of the times that I know that the association I was involved with, they would not tolerate any discussion on policy and politics because it was conflicting with their 503 or 501c3 C3 designation, to where they're organized with the IRS to provide education or scholarly work and not politics. They could do a little bit, but what they didn't understand is that a person, a nurse, has a hot button. They want to advocate for a thing. And so when they hear, oh, no, you can't talk about that. Well, they're going, well, why don't you talk about it? You're the organ. So there's a failure to communicate what policy is, because typically our role is to deal with healthcare problems through nursing, but it's also to deal with the knowledge deficit. And if we're to change policy, if we're to create policy, we really bring our experience and knowledge. So we're addressing a knowledge deficit. It's a basic nursing diagnosis, right? So whether it's that you're testifying or you're talking to somebody, what we're doing to change policy is addressing knowledge deficit. So we have to be experts in that. So I think part of the problem I know with our association is members were a little disappointed because they wanted the organization to support their work, whatever it was. And they didn't communicate very well because they're terrified. The executive directors are terrified. The IRS was going to say, hey, you're doing politics. We're going to yank your tax exempt. You're going to pay us back all this. So they're terrified of it. But they didn't communicate very well. So anyway, that was my observation. But the other thing I wanted to mention was this in your opening slide, you mentioned belonging is a precursor to advocacy. I love belongingness. And in suicidality, we know that many suicides are not as a result of depression. They're not necessarily a psychological. In fact, probably half of the people that die have never been diagnosed with a psychiatric condition. But thwarted belongingness and a sense of burdensomeness to other people is more powerful in contributing to the idea of suicidality. So belongingness is very important. And I think when we talk about policy and how we address it, listen to the Supreme Court arguments. There is a professional venue for arguing. They don't call each other names. They don't put each other down. Say, well, what about this? Now, how do you address it? It's a very cordial, professional argument. It's vigorous. And there are people that are staunch advocates for their side. But the way they go about it is very professional. And I think we could learn a lot from how we talk about issues, because if there's more than two people in the room, we're going to disagree on stuff. That's why in the cafe, we don't talk about issues. We talk about how do you become good at addressing policies. We don't talk about issues because all of a sudden we're going to be in the weeds. And I think people typically don't know how to discuss an issue. We don't know how because we have our thing. So I think a powerful way to learn how to have that discussion, listen to the Supreme Court argue, listen to what the justices say to the two attorneys that are arguing. And I'm just throwing that in because I always like to turn whatever we talk about here into a way that we can learn how to be more effective. So if you want to go discuss, you want to go help legislators understand why chemical dependency is the issue with homelessness, you've got to go in there and you've got to be persuasive, not just in your information, but the way that you do it, because typically you won't be heard by the facts. It's how you say a thing that's important. It's not what you say. I mean, you see that all the time. That's what Facebook is. People just spout out a thing. That's not compulsive. It doesn't help people. So understanding how to talk to people is very important. So anyway, I appreciate this session. It's been very helpful for me.
Thank you.
I really like that comment you made, Michael, about belonging, and to just kind of bring that up briefly again, especially being new, coming out of a place where you were once a nursing student and you had a sense of belonging, right? You had your study groups, you had your community, maybe you didn't, but at that end stage, you have some sort of belonging. And coming into a space where you're completely new, you don't know anyone, you don't know how to get involved, you lose your sense of belonging. And I think the YPSIG is definitely a great way to bring that sense of belonging back, especially like for me, that's something I was worried about coming out of nursing school. I was super, super involved. I told myself, how am I going to, keep up that momentum? Because that's the type of person I am. I love, being involved. And so for me, I had to rebuild my entire sense of belonging. And that took networking. That took, starting from ground zero. And so I really like how you brought that up. And I actually do think that, a lot of new nurses, especially, when they don't know how to deal with that sense of belonging, that they can fall into different, I don't know what the statistics are specifically, but just off of what I've seen, I have seen that issue with them being depressed or not having great coping mechanisms. So I do like.
And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do here with the cafe as well, is creating that space for belonging and empowering, everyone for in that professional identity as policy, advocates and partners as well. And that's, what initially grabbed me in this community. And we've had, one of our community members, Jason, he said after coming to one of our cafes that he found his people, and I feel like that's really it's a huge compliment to us and the work we're doing at the cafe, that we do have this space for like-minded nurses who are interested in that policy and advocacy piece to have some sense of belonging and to again lay that foundation for that professional identity to grow on. And I actually was thinking about this with Delaney and your experience with across EMS and exercise physiology and your previous kind of lives, professional lives. How have you experienced belonging in those different professions, and how is that compared to nursing? And what would you kind of take, or what pros and cons would you take away or work on with that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think EMS and nursing, it depends on the type of nurse you are, right? I feel like it, technology and social media has portrayed different types of nurses as different tropes. You get your EMS, like the adrenaline junkies. You get your ICU, the very type A personalities. You get your infusion nurses, maybe the very chill, relaxed. Like, it just really depends. And EMS is very much the adrenaline junkie, like sleep in the firehouse, like jump in the back of the rig with like a Red Bull in your hand, like kind of like intubate on the go type of thing. But you're all one big family because you know that if something messes up, like if you mess up, like that's someone's life in your hand. So but you're getting paid pennies on the dollar, and you're not being supported by your organizations, and you're not being supported by the policies behind it. And so it wasn't the belonging and the my coworkers that I didn't feel supported by. It was the overall support of the system that I didn't feel supported by. So I felt belonging there, but the fall of the system. And then in exercise physiology, it was also just the support from underneath that I didn't have, because the funds weren't there. I went into research in exercise physiology. My thesis for my master's degree in exercise physiology was on preventative cardiology. So I was doing research on utilizing part of cardiac rehabilitation prior to elective cardiovascular procedures in order to prevent postoperative complications. And there's just no money in it because the complications are what make the money. The heart attacks are what make the money, not the recovery, not recovering faster and going to cardiac rehab. And so it's more, again, the system, but also so like the belonging didn't feel there because people felt like they were stuck. But then I went into nursing because at the same time that I was working as a research exercise physiologist, I was working as a telemetry technician on a cardiovascular like a cardiac transplant unit at the VA. And the nurses there, it was weird how I kind of got to nursing. I always wanted to go into medicine. That's why I've always kind of gravitated around the same type. But I found my way because of the crew that I worked with when I was a teletech. I knew that it was a stable career. It was a trusted and respected career. I knew I could always, there was no ceiling in terms of where I could go. And it was so broad that if I got that RN, I wasn't stuck. There wasn't a ceiling that I could reach. I could always go higher. I could switch, and I wouldn't feel like I was going down a level. It didn't feel like I was on an elevator that was no longer creeping up, and that's how I felt in both my other careers, or like concurrent careers, I guess. And so as soon as I got on that nursing like elevator, I felt like, okay, I can always go up, even if I'm getting out and walking down the hallway, I'm always making progress. And so for nursing, it felt like I always had someone reaching out for me, someone, like, even if there's toxic culture, I usually just step off to the side. I'm always the person that if someone says something that's snarky, I'm just like, can you explain what you mean by that? I'm the very like laissez-faire, like, oh, can you explain what you mean by that? I'm just curious. Like, try to be very non-judgmental while trying to get them to understand what's going on type of person. And I think that comes from just trying to be like welcoming of as many people as I can, having been in so many different careers at my I just turned 30 last year, so it's like I've been in EMS for 12 years. I was in exercise physiology for 8 before I became a nurse, and so nursing is all encompassing. But I know that if I want to switch to dialysis, I can. If I want to go into research or professorship or whatever, I will always have a mentor or a soft or like I will have a place to land if I change my mind. And I just felt more stuck in other careers. So nursing will always have somewhere else to go and somewhere else to be, and you can grow who you are without having to drop the RN, which I saw in like the chats, which makes me so sad that people feel like they have to like leave the profession altogether when we should be cultivating a workforce that makes people feel as if they can maybe just step to the side rather than step away altogether.
That is an elevator pitch for nursing, pun
Literally.
intended.
Yeah.
I love how you described it that way. And I'm really happy to hear someone who's so new in their nursing career to say that too. It makes it seem like you have so much hope and endless opportunity in your career. And I think that's great. I think that's something that's a fresh perspective in younger generations of nursing that I think that we need more, especially as like the modern nursing is just not what it looked like 10, 20, 30 years ago, and we professionalized so much to become, I think, entrepreneurs in the sense of being able to be creative with what you do with that RN behind your name. And I think I hear a lot of older generations of nurses, not age-wise, but nursing-wise, think that they have to drop the RN if they want to affect any change, because that's how they're taken seriously, because they have colleagues that are at the same stage of their careers or same age generation wise who are not in nursing and don't see nurses as having that entrepreneurial spirit. They don't come together like automatically. I think that's going to change and I hope it changes. So it's less about, I think, having belonging in the profession. I think it's more about trying to find a different way to do something to affect that change. And for me, and I think for a lot of others, the frustration, and you alluded to this, is with the system that's broken. So we can talk about really building ourselves up, capacitizing ourselves to be able to become these full partners in healthcare reform. But even if we are doing the right thing by looking inward and reforming and refining in nursing before we kind of try to reform and refine the system is still broken and doesn't recognize us as those leaders. And so I think maybe one way that I might ask for the YPSIG group that could address this, again, taking that different approach to thinking. I just became a mentor for someone who's 63 years old. There's like so many things we can learn from each other. So have you engaged with other parts of New York, other state chapters that do they have young professional groups like this? Are you doing group mentorship within even ANA to kind of expand the way that you're thinking here?
I think it's still so. Oh, Joe, we can go. Josephine, she put her hand up.
Hello, everyone. How are you? So, yes, I can answer that question a little bit. So, currently, we are in conversation with the Texas Nurses Association, which is a really big organization, in order to expand the model to Texas. But there's other state that has also expressed interest, including California and as well as Georgia with the Georgia Nurses Association. So just that right now the conversation have started with Texas Nurses Association, and we hope to move on to California and Georgia in the near future. But yes, there's a lot of interest. However, other state nurses association do have something similar, just that they don't call it young professionals, right? Or they will have like an early career nurse leader on their board, but it's not an official special interest group. So the idea of a special interest group is really special to ANA New York. ANA New York came up with that, and that's what, but I think in other state may be called something different, but we hope to keep expanding it and the model in other states so they can try it out, since ours have been so successful. But yes, a lot of people are expressing interest, and also on the ANA national organization as well. It's not young professionals, but they came up with the ANA Next Gen Ambassadors, right? Which Mozelle is part of it, and it's a 1 year program to really get them to be involved in initiatives, leadership opportunities, as well as attending various conferences. So that's also like a huge opportunities for nurses under 30. So the ANA Next Gen Ambassadors is only nurses under 30. So we hope to roll out the next phase after this cohort is done, and many people should apply. But yes, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining, Josephine. I know you're traveling today. Really appreciate your presence in this conversation as well. I wanted to briefly pop back to Delaney's metaphor about the elevator, because I was envisioning it in my head. And sometimes when we're on the elevator, we feel it stop at a certain floor, and we're pushing the button, like, dang, this thing is stuck. This profession's not going anywhere. And we're just that metaphor for feeling stuck in your profession, but knowing that you can always take it to the next level. And even if that level doesn't exist yet, we open the ceiling, we start building it so the elevator can keep going for us and for all those behind us too. I think a phrase that I say often when talking about kind of this bigger picture of nursing is that we truly do stand on the shoulders of giants. And that could be, again, in our hot button issues, or just in policy, and the fact that we've been talking about nurses engaging in policy in this kind of really actionable, present, engaged way wasn't a conversation they were having 50 years ago, the nurses, and that came before us. So I think every conversation that we have to like this on, on our monthly basis, but even the conversations you're having in YPSIG are really meaningful. And it really does start with that single kind of, idea of, I can maybe see myself doing that, and having those resources, having those safe spaces to land, like you were saying, Delaney, as well. But I personally have to hop soon, so I'm gonna close out my participation in the session. But what we can leave the room open for a little bit, and let people kind of talk if you'd like. Feel free to put any links that you guys would like to follow up on in the chat as far as the YPSIG. And if people want to continue the conversation afterwards as well, feel free to pop your LinkedIn in there. We also have our community forum and our LinkedIn page, which I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk you guys through that in a second. Just to highlight here, we do have several areas for further engagement, like I was kind of alluding to before. As far as our website, it's I think Grace put a link to it in the chat earlier, but we have different resources for those different essential elements, as far as, like I said, like links, and our YouTube videos are of our monthly cafes are posted every month. We also have our global cafe networking map, and you can add yourself to that just to highlight what other nurse policy entrepreneurs in the community are around you in your local area. I think it would be really lovely at some point in the future to just have coordinated, planned in-person cafes. I know there are a ton of people in New York, so kind of watch this space. I would love to plan something like that in the future, but this truly is a global community. We have people call in from the US and around the world, truly. So really excited to just have that resource for individuals on our website too. Also a plug for our LinkedIn. We do post about our different monthly cafes on our events tab there, and are constantly reposting different things that might be relevant to people or nurses wanting to engage in policy spaces as well. Our community forum is available on our website, admittedly not as active as as it could be. So if you want to continue the conversation there, feel free to pop a post, and we can continue there. But thank you guys so much for joining today. If you have to hop off, go ahead and feel free to do that.